As of 2025, about 42% of enterprises surveyed report that they actively deploy AI, but others remain stuck in pilot or experimental phase. My name is Paul Nashawaty. I'm the practice lead for the AppDev practice, and I'm joined by Keerti from Anyscale. Keerti, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you, Paul?
I'm doing very well. Well, would you like to introduce yourself and introduce Anyscale?
Absolutely, yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Keerti Melkote. I'm the CEO of Anyscale. Joined here 18 months ago to join the party with Robert, Jan, and Philip, who got this company going to really create a compute engine for AI workloads. And Ray, as a compute engine is called, is what the company Anyscale that I'm a part of pioneered. And now Ray, as an open source engine, is getting a lot of traction, and Anyscale is building a commercial business around it.
Well, I'm really excited to have you on today because this podcast, we're looking at discussing how to redefine organizations, how they're thinking about AI infrastructure, and moving beyond cloud-native frameworks to systems built for AI from the ground up. This means they have to be dynamic, they finely grained, and as well as optimized for modernized architectures and accelerators. So there's really a lot happening, and I think Anyscale really brings a lot to that conversation here. But when we talk here, Keerti, I want to explore how the real challenges that we see isn't just building AI, but it's deploying safely and efficiently at scale. Also, how smarter GPU utilization can really drive measurable ROI. A lot of companies are trying to figure out, they've made a big investment in these GPUs. They want to know where the money's coming back from and why openness and community-driven innovation are really a key to the power in the next generation of intelligent applications. So when we look at this, Keerti, I wanted to get your take on a couple of things. We'll jump right in and talk about the rise of AI native computing, right? AI has really outgrown the cloud native infrastructure. It's not just about cloud native. It's about a bigger picture here. We're entering a new era where systems are being designed for AI from the ground up, dynamic, finely grained, optimized accelerators. That's really a lot that has to go with this. So when you mentioned, why kind of Anyscale was formed, but that's part of the reason, but helping define this new architectural layer that will really power the next generation of intelligent applications. What are your thoughts around what's going on with this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very helpful to look at this in the context of generational transitions and shifts that have happened before this. If you look at the internet, right, that was the first big shift, if you will, and there was a stack that came around the internet. We called it the LAMP stack, Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP, which was an open source, and it really allowed you to create these web applications, the first generation of the internet, if you will. And then came the cloud, and if you look at cloud, it had its own architecture, built around the idea of microservices and containers. And, you had programs like Kubernetes and Redis and Kafka and Spark and many other open source frameworks that were built to enable the cloud native stack. And that was a big transition and a shift and a generational opportunity for a number of organizations. And the mantra typically in these transitions is you innovate or die. I think stories like Amazon disrupting Barnes and Noble, Uber disrupting the taxi industry, there are many of those in the world around us. So AI is a similar generational shift, and it will drive its own compute stack. And AI workloads are fundamentally different than microservices and cloud, which is why it is driving its own computing stack. And that's the reason why we see this heightened, I would say, a need for embracing what we call AI native computing, with the model at the heart of it and AI workloads driving it.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, in this day and age with AI, I would say in 25, and I would even say going into 26, right? Going into next year, we're seeing that organizations are really starting to innovate. They're trying to drive, innovation around using things like MCP servers and AUA and different AI kind of technologies. But the real bottleneck for deploying AI is not just building it. It's really where most enterprises can prototype these AI systems, but the real challenge is scaling it safely, reliably, and also cost effectively, right? We see the next basically the next wave of AI advantage will come from organizations that can close the gap between the flexibility, interoperability, infrastructure, as well as turning models into production systems, not just science projects, right? We see that some studies that were recently in the field saying that what 95% of AI projects failed or haven't been deployed. I think that's real because in my mind, there's so much experimentation going on right now. In 26, I believe that experimentation is going to kind of move towards real life production environment. What are your thoughts there?
Absolutely. I think at this point, as you said, the first couple of years have been about experimentation, right? These models are here. They can do many interesting things. How do I get used to them? How do I prompt them? How do I get interesting responses? And how do I build, business value out of it? But now, as AI goes into production, it becomes real, right? The investments become real. The ROI becomes real. Those are real questions. And what's happening today is the world of AI is very siloed. Data processing, which is a AI workload, drives its own stack. Training, model training, and fine tuning drives its own stack. Inference, which is a large portion of the workload, and agentic. Each one of these things drive their own stack. And the truth is, as organizations integrate AI more and more into their workflows and innovate, the AI workload itself is getting quite complex. And so between the siloed nature of things and the application profile getting much more complex, organizations are not able to move as fast as they want to move, which is very important. And they're spending a boatload more money because of the siloed nature of things, right? Every silo needs its own GPUs, needs its own CPUs. There's no shared infrastructure that brings everything together across all the different workloads. And so we see those two as the most significant challenges: iteration velocity for developers to move fast and deliver value to the business, and cost of GPUs. And Ray and Anyscale is perfectly positioned to solve for those two problems.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing a lot of kind of industry analysis around exactly this point of do organizations build their own? How do they maximize the usage of the resources? Because the cost of building AI projects can't, like you're saying, is very expensive. I mean, I was just at a conference event last couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about the AWS AI data centers that are being built. And these are just trying to use shared resources, but some things can be shared, some things cannot be shared. Some things need to be used that are dedicated, especially when you get into governance, compliance, and regulation situations. The AI solutions like to be dedicated. But let's talk about AI efficiency as it's part of key to really that return on the investment, right? When we look at how AI costs do and can and are skyrocketing, the next competitive advantage that I see organizations coming up with that come across these enterprises will maximize the utilization of the GPUs, but also reclaim the wasted compute to cut costs. But it also will help accelerate scaling models as well as reduce energy use. Because those are things that, if you remember, before the big AI push, there was this big initiative around sustainability, right? We have to reduce the usage of things. That kind of went to the side when this little thing called AI popped up, right? And then now we have smarter efficiency is really kind of unlocking that faster innovation, higher scale, and measurable ROI without billions in new infrastructure. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think sustainability, if you think of GPU utilization, directly, obviously cost savings associated with it, but it's also more sustainable. So I think it's a win-win to attack that particular problem. But how do you attack it, right? GPU utilization is low because you have parked GPUs for projects. Like, I'm going to train a model, I'm going to serve this model and do some inference on it. Or you've parked GPUs for specific frameworks. PyTorch as my training framework gets its own bank of GPUs. I might be using something else for inference. So this siloed nature fundamentally leads you to disconnected pools of resources within the enterprise. And those disconnected pools are only active when that silo is active. And you're not training all the time. So you might be training for an epoch for a period of time, and then the resources go dormant. They don't get utilized until the next training run kicks in. Same thing with inference. Inference may be your peak workloads might be when your traffic is high. And at night when people sleep, maybe the GPUs are not as heavily utilized. How do you interplay and mix GPUs across training and inference? You can only do that when you have something unifying between the two, so that you can flex back and forth. And I think this is the dynamic that we see playing out is The siloed nature driving up costs, driving down utilization. And by unifying it on a single framework, you can move faster and lower cost and get more sustainable.
Yeah, I mean, this is not new, right? I mean, we've seen this for a long time in cloud resources, right? The bedtime scripts for developers to make things kind of come up and go down. I think that applying some of that modeling to AI initiatives makes a lot of sense. Is that what you're kind of saying?
Yeah, it is. It is. It absolutely is. The difference is GPUs are the thing now. In the cloud, we were looking at CPUs. It was monolithic infrastructure. We kind of knew, how to optimize that world. But that world is now very different with GPUs. Right? It's a mix of CPUs and GPUs. GPUs are getting interconnected in a data center with high-speed networking technologies. So the data center is changing, right? So, and the frameworks as a result that orchestrate all of this new hardware has to change as a result. So yeah, it's applying lessons we learned from the past, but to new problems with GPUs in the mix.
Yeah, I agree. I also think there's an education that needs to occur, right? Because there are some projects, AI-based projects, that don't even need a GPU, right? They can be using CPUs, right? And so if you have this openness, kind of this, as part of the accelerator for your AI initiative, initiatives and innovation, the AI infrastructure really does need to be open, accessible, and community driven to keep up with the pace in the field. This allows for what we were just talking about, that ebb and flowing. Do you think that openness is a good way to kind of drive towards that accelerator, or is it because like you said, the data center is changing and it needs to adapt to the needs? But I also think the education for the people that are building the projects also needs to be understood.
Absolutely. I think being open is the fastest way to move, in my opinion. And this is what's happened in every era before, because it allows you to not feel locked in to a single vendor architecture. You basically have freedom to be able to collaborate with the open source community. It's the world at large. So we fundamentally see openness and open source in particular being a very effective way to embrace this mega trend that we are seeing unfold in front of us. And the key to me is, how do you now take this openness and interconnect it with everything around it, again, in an open way, to deliver architectures that are enterprise ready, secure, able to implement fast and move fast within the enterprises.
Yeah. So Keerti, what do you see 2026 being as the kind of the main focus? I mean, we talked about experimentation in 25. We talked about production applications. I mean, when I ran my 25 research, 51% of organizations that have AI in their production applications, I would argue that, now it's closer to 70% or more. What do you see 26 being? What are the big things that are going to pop in 2026?
I see 2026 emerging as the year of custom models. I think so far we have looked at open or proprietary models, accessing them over APIs. That was the 2024. 2025 was the agentic year, using those models not just in a simple prompt-based or RAG-based application, but building more sophisticated applications using agents. But I think now we are entering the era of, I want to differentiate myself as an enterprise. I want to, and open weights models are fueling this new era where enterprises are interested in customizing the models for their own unique use cases, because their data is theirs. None of the models out there are trained on the enterprise proprietary data. And so therefore, expecting those models to give unique insights into the enterprise's business without being trained on the enterprise's data is a stretch. They will still be available for more general purpose type use cases, but for the specific use cases that an enterprise will need and drive for their own unique insights for their business, they will build custom models, and they will build sophisticated transformer-based custom models or fine-tune open models and open weight models that are out there. So I see this as the world of customized, sophisticated Gen AI models coming from the enterprise.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think that that's the direction it's going. I also want to add to that there will be I would call it a bridging the gap between the heritage environments to the new environments and how they're going to get there. So almost a modernization play. But then again, modernization is like a treadmill. You're always on it. You're always running. But Keerti, we're at the end here. we talked about a lot. We talked about future predictions. We talked about the data centers and where they're going and the ability to ebb and flow resources. Where would you advise the audience to go to learn more about what we're talking about here?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, just understanding the landscape and how it's emerging in the open source community, I think is a great window into how the leading AI native ecosystem is actually moving. I think you can see this emergence of this thing called the Park Stack with PyTorch, AI models, Ray, and Kubernetes kind of coming together. So learning more about the Park Stack and how that helps you implement this new AI native computing stack for your own organizations and the value and the benefits it drives is a great way to get started. The other one is, I would say, the business value and understanding how you can drive more business value by unifying your infrastructure to be able to move with multiple workloads at the same time. Ray, I'll give a quick plug to what we do here. Ray is that unifying compute engine. So that's ray.io is a great place to go learn more about Ray. And Anyscale, we're building Anyscale to provide a platform, a unified AI platform for enterprises to build their AI. And I personally think this is where the world is going in 2026. Build your models versus just use a model that's out there. And Anyscale.com is another great place.
Yeah, Keerti, thank you for joining me. And definitely check out Anyscale. I think Anyscale and Ray is going to be a kind of an integral part of how things work in the future and how what we talked about here would help with this. But thank you for your insights and thank you for being my guest on the podcast today. And a big thank you to all of you who've tuned in. We really do appreciate you being part of the AppDevANGLE community. But for now, that wraps up this episode. But we'll be back next Wednesday with another conversation diving into tools, trends, and talents shaping the future of application development. So whether you're developing and deploying at the edge, building with AI, or modernizing your cloud stack, we've got you covered. Be sure to follow us on social if you have any thoughts, questions, or just want to connect. Until next time, stay curious and stay building.